Darwin Shurig, president of Shurig Solutions Incorporated. Excited to have Ted Bird with us today to talk about an incredible product at his company. Ted has over 35 years of commercial experience with medical devices, specific focus in orthopedics and spine. Previous stops at Medtronic, at DePuy Synthes of J&J. Also was the COO of Triton Medical and has been is on advisory on boards currently and has been on numerous boards previously. Incredible experience in business development, global marketing, as well as medical education. So he is currently the Executive Vice President of Corporate Development and the Chief Strategy Officer for Dymicron. I think I said that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Dymicron. There we go.
Okay, Dymicron. So welcome. We're super excited to have you on and get to share some of your experiences over your illustrious career and this incredible technology and product that I think has the opportunity to make a significant impact in this market moving forward in the future. So welcome.
Thank you, Darwin. I really appreciate the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to those of you that are able to join this evening at the first week of August. Unbelievable, this year is moving along as it is. But I'm really excited to talk about the market that I'm focused on right now with Dymicron, which is spinal motion preservation, and specifically in the neck and the cervical spine. Just to start out, I want to cover some history of the company. And it's a really fascinating story. And Darwin and I think in this hour are going to talk about, career decisions with respect to a small company, choices that you make to join a small company versus a large company. And, Dymicron is absolutely a fascinating story. So from my perspective, what attracted me to start working with Dymicron was the innovation, they have pioneered. The history of the company is that the founder was a professor of biomaterials at Brigham Young University, and he was an absolute pioneer in the manufacturing and application of man-made diamond. This development of this material called polycrystalline diamond. And applying it initially very successfully for industrial applications for deep earth mining. His work resulted in revolutionary changes in the oil drilling and recovery industry, where these polycrystalline diamond drill bits were manufactured by Dr. Pope and his team at a company they built called US Synthetic that was extremely successful. It took over that market. And Dymicron came out of that, and there's always a story behind every company. And the story at Dymicron is Dr. Pope had a good friend who told him he had to go back to the hospital to undergo a surgery for a failed hip implant.
Okay.
And Dr. Pope was not a medical device guy, but he was a materials guy, and it just concerned him to the extent that he's like, I think I have a solution for that. I have this material that should eliminate that problem. And he started learning more about it. That couldn't believe these patients, in those days, this was 20 years ago, were only lasting 10, 15, maybe 20 years, these hips or knees, and they had to go back and get another one. And he's like, that's just not right. If you get an implant at the age of 40, you don't want to have to go back, when you're still feeling good and enjoying life at the age of 60 and get another one. It's quite a process. And so that's where Dymicron was born, through taking his work, his material, polycrystalline diamond, and then it took a while. It was a research project for about 10 years, small little company in the Salt Lake City, Utah area, where they had to essentially work on creating a biocompatible form of this polycrystalline diamond. And they take carbon powder, diamond powder, and they put it together with a special alloy. They sinter it together, and it's an amazing process. And this is all patented as well. then to manufacture it and make it reliably, they they use a huge diamond press. It's incredible to see. It's this massive uh, press that puts this material that they put into a titanium can under 1,000,000 pounds per square inch and 1,500 degrees Celsius during a 4-minute period, and it presses out these blanks basically. And that's made of polycrystalline diamond. Then they have to lap and polish it and make it into the implant. So they focused on initially hip because of that because of his friend, but pivoted about 10 years ago to the spine.
Fine.
So that's where the cervical spine, because of the dimensions of the implant and the market, the opportunity for an implant that really solves the problem of wear debris. That's where the company, made sense to pivot to the cervical spine. So that's kind of the background, and the company uh, got into finalizing their product, basically, the manufacturing process and the unique design. There's two real factors and features I'm going to talk about, later in the broadcast about the specific design of the product. But it was the material that allowed a PhD engineer, also in Utah at the University of Utah near Salt Lake City, who looked at all of the other artificial implants that were out there and saw a theme. And the theme was they're all ball and socket design, where they rotate around a central core. And he was matching that up with his PhD experience in human anatomy and kinematics, and saying this is not really replicating the normal spinal motion.
Right.
And he came up, with a new design, which was a trilobe, essentially a tripod, 3 balls in 3 pockets instead of 1 ball in 1 pocket, in order to more closely mimic the normal motion of the
Motion
spine
and the stability,
and
whereas ball and
stability.
socket, it's almost inversely proportional, the stability to the motion, and this gives
Right.
you both, right?
Yeah. So that design would not be possible with today's materials, peak polyethylene or
Oh,
cobalt chrome or titanium, because they would just wear out, and where polycrystalline diamond was perfect. So it was the material that allowed that very innovative and breakthrough design to come together. And that's kind of where the company is today. They completed that design in 2012, 13, 14, and actually got the first in man implant 6 years ago, 2015. They got a CE mark, and the product was first used over in Europe. And now, there's over almost 400, patients now that have the implant in select markets over in Europe. And the company is preparing for an FDA IDE study to allow us to get into the U.S. market. But that's kind of the quick tour to catch up where we are today.
that's super exciting. And the drill bits for the deep mining, that's an incredible story all by itself. And
Yeah.
so now as you look at these different materials and the innovation, and as we'll certainly get into the design, how the improved motion is similar to patient's normal fluid motion, then also that decrease in wear, making that go away. Obviously, all the different challenges that can create with tissue and inflammation and things of that nature. So I'm excited to get into that with you. So I really appreciate you going through that summary, kind of where the company's come from. Why don't we take the opportunity? We talked earlier about, you've been at some really big companies, you've been at some smaller companies, and now this is a really dynamic startup pre-commercial with some exciting, really exciting opportunities in the future for it. Maybe speak to us a little bit about your perspective of the larger company versus the smaller, and help our following maybe think about how you make those types of decisions, pros and cons.
That's a great question. I think it's a great topic, Darwin. And as I alluded to when I started talking about Dymicron, what excited me was this was a small company, and at the stage that I'm at in my career, is I really, have gravitated towards the small private companies that are innovating
Mm.
and doing things with technology, and whether it's surgical technique design or implant design, that are truly moving the needle for the healthcare system, for the patient, making things better. Game changing type technologies. I really have a passion for knowing that I'm working with an organization or on a project that is making a difference. It's not just another commodity, item, not another widget with a different color that we're
Right.
just trying to sell. And I had experience with widgets. Believe me, I was the group marketing manager for fracture fixation at Johnson and Johnson, which is the casting division. So not really exciting, casting, but we made it fun because back then um, we went to color casts, and that was a big change. When we first went to color, and then we went to logos. I had to negotiate with NFL properties and Marvel Comics, to get the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles put on the cast.
On a
Um,
casket.
yeah, uh, we made it fun, but back to the big company versus small company. What I really appreciated, and I still appreciate today, when I'm speaking with, folks that are earlier in their careers than me, and I love to mentor, younger folks to help them avoid the mistakes that I've made. But I do appreciate about the big company experience is you get tremendous training and professional development opportunities at companies like Johnson and Johnson, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Stryker, um, and they have tremendous resources to do that, to invest in their people. The other thing that I appreciate when I'm interviewing someone for a position to join, my company, is knowing that they've been in a larger company, they've been taught the right way to do things. If it's an engineer, you've got to go through that process, GMP, design for manufacturing, validation and verification process. There's certain boxes that have to be checked,
Right.
for it to be done right. And if you don't go through that, and maybe you start out right out of school and hit the startup world, you don't have the same luxury of getting the opportunity to get that input and that training or that mentoring, and you're usually just thrown right into it and say, "Hey, figure it out." You're the R&D department now,
You don't know what you
and
don't know,
yeah.
right? So the risk
So
management and how you oversee that compliance
yeah,
without having too much risk is maybe not as fluid.
correct. So those are the pluses. The frustration, and this was a frustration for me, and I'm sure it is for many others today, is big companies just don't move quickly. It gets frustrating if you want to see progress in your project, you want to see innovation, it's the right thing, but a lot of the bigger companies are just risk adverse. They don't want to take the risk to the Johnson and Johnson name, to the Medtronic name. They're going to wait and maybe acquire that technology or that product or that company, once they've proven it out, and they're willing to pay a lot more for it. But for a type A person, for an entrepreneurial spirit person who likes to get things done, it can become frustrating. Many people make a decision to stay, in the big company environment, and I've had conversations with many folks that regret that they didn't kind of wake up and realize they stayed too long. They've been somewhere 20 years,
You can get
and then
siloed
something
a little bit sometimes too.
gets siloed, and then something happens. But a lot of the mentality is that this is a stable environment
Right.
versus a startup. Startup's risky. You just don't know if your product's going to make it, or your company's going to make it, or you're going to get the financing. And so I'm safer in this environment. But that's not so much anymore. The bigger companies, you know, uh, you see it at the bigger companies making decisions on justifying as consolidation occurs. There's duplicate roles, and you have to end up interviewing for your position every other year or so. And as you go up the chain and ladder, it becomes a pretty regular event
Yeah.
of having to weed out the 20 to 30% that you need to clean out, that is no fun.
Right.
And that's the worst part of being
Whatever
a
they want to
manager.
call it, right sizing,
Yeah, yeah.
downsizing, whatever.
Refining to be more efficient, et cetera.
I,
So so
I,
that's the small company. You get that flexibility, you get that speed, you get that autonomy, you get that opportunity to move your career very quickly because you're given so much opportunity to gain experience. And through those decisions, you can see tremendous career growth. But you have to be willing to understand, um, have confidence that if that company doesn't work out, you get in there, you find it's not the right fit, or they're not on the right project, you move on. You don't, wait 10 years and decide, I'll figure that out later. So there's pros and cons to both. But in my own experience, I feel blessed that I had that opportunity with the J&Js and the Medtronics, and stint at Boston Scientific, to learn the ropes, not just in the US, globally,
mhm.
around the world, and then be able to apply that experience to smaller companies, to startups, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. I think you're just spot on. Certainly, my experience with Phillips and McKesson as example, of very large entities and smaller companies. I think that understanding where you're at in your career goals, where you want to get to, and understanding that what you're going to get from that, because it's a balance, right? You can't have everything in terms of risk and reward and what you look at that. But at the same time, when you're at a startup, you're at a company that's able to move a little bit quicker. I almost look at it like dog years in your career growth, right? Because the experience, sometimes a year or two at a startup can be like 3 or 4 at a larger company. Um,
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that. Let's dive into talking about the spinal motion market
Yeah.
and design and material and some of the things that affect and differentiate this product versus the rest of the marketplace. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So that's the other exciting thing, and why it was exciting for me again to gravitate to Dymicron, is because they're focused on the cervical total disc replacement market, and it's one of the hottest segments in spine right now. The literature is coming out on the first and the second generation products, very strong for motion versus fusion.
Mhm.
So it works, and you're seeing, the surgeons, as well as the insurance companies, adopt this technology, and that's so key. That you get the endorsement and the ability to get reimbursed to the surgeon and the hospital for your technology. It's there. So it's still so much upside in, and let me stick to the cervical market. You've got cervical degenerative disc disease is just debilitating. If many of us know, either have had it, back or neck pain, or have family members that have had it. It is something that the patient, it just drives you crazy. Thank goodness I haven't had it, but I've had friends that have, and because I'm an expert in this field, I get calls about every other week or so. Someone saying, "Hey, who should I go to?
Yeah.
Or what should I do next?" But um, it's now growing at double digits, almost 20% a year. There are over 350,000 cervical procedures just in the U.S. alone. It's about half the worldwide numbers, about 700,000 total, and it's only about 10 to 15% of those are being done by discs today, and at least 80% of them are suitable and can be done by discs as there's more experience in multi levels, etc. Um, so it's a very, very attractive and growth space, and fusion, motion versus fusion
And
today.
the fusion, oftentimes they have to have another surgery. So, in terms of the benefit, not only the benefit and the cost of motion versus fusion, in the long haul, it's in the long run, it's better and potentially less
Right,
expensive
right.
versus the fusion.
Yeah, what motion does, is because you're prolonging the ability for that joint that is having an artificial, displaced. It's taking the pressure off the adjacent segments, and the fusion doesn't do that. When you're, immobilizing a segment through a fusion, that force is going to translate to that next level
Hmm.
And the literature shows you get adjacent segment breakdown.
Yeah.
And you even have now procedures today where you get hybrid procedures where surgeons are doing, a fusion at one level and an artificial disc at another level, or a patient that's already been fused, they'll do, a disc instead of continuing to go up with a fusion. So the technology is really being applied in a great way, which points to the fact that it's going to be a big factor, over the next 5 to 10 years in the marketplace. And so, the products that lead the way in the market today, you've got, just talking about the US market, you've got 5 FDA approved US discs in the marketplace. All of them pretty much, I would call them first generation ball and socket designs. They're performing well. The literature is good. It's the Medtronic Prestige. It's a metal on metal device, one of the first ones that's out there, probably number 2 in the market share in the space. You've got Sentinel Spine, who bought the Pro Disc from DePuy Synthes, who actually bought it from the Viscogliosi brothers, who owned the Pro Disc before. So hats off to my friends, the Viscogliosi brothers, but they've got it back, and they're coming up with new designs for that product. But it's a metal on plastic fixed core design. It's a first generation. And then you've got Zimmer Biomet did a big acquisition of a company called LDR for $1 billion, primarily for
Money.
their disc, the LDR Mobi C disc. And that's a metal on plastic, kind of a mobile core type design. That's number 3. And then you've got Orthofix, who acquired the M6 disc, more of a viscoelastic type design, but also with a ceramic core that has a cushioning effect and a kind of an artificial annulus. They're just out in the last year, 18 months with their 1-level design, and now starting a study for their 2-level. And then the big news in 2021 was the Simplify Medical disc, which is a unique design, peak on ceramic, and some unique dimensions to it, was acquired by NuVasive in the first quarter of this year. So those are the 5, all FDA approved. There are about 20 other designs out of Europe mostly that are not, for whatever reason, going through the FDA process, but first generation type designs. And Dymicron
And
really stands apart.
Ted, and so that's kind of what I wanted to segue into, right? Because all of those that you just talked about in terms of ball and socket, whereas how you get more motion, less stability. So the challenge with the ball and socket, Dymicron basically solves that potentially with their model, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that's where our product called Triadyme, tri for the tri-lobe, and Dyme for the diamond, and polycrystalline diamond. I call it the sexiest product in the market today, and it's made of diamond. So we can, but it's not the brittle jewelry type diamond,
Right.
but of course the diamond is still sexy. The Triadyme, really it's a revolutionary biomaterial, and as I said before, it's a dual innovation device. It's the fact that this polycrystalline diamond is what enabled this unique motion feature to be applied to the design, and so we call it arthroplastic diamond. It's another way to call the polycrystalline diamond. Almost entirely comprised of carbon. It's the strongest material in the universe. It doesn't wear. We just can't pick up anywhere, which means it's going to last. You're not going to have wear debris related complications. The design mimics basically healthy spinal motion. It can't be replicated by simple geometric ball and socket design. And the advantages are the wear debris and the superior kinematics. Basically, it's designed to replicate the complex natural motion of the spine. You have these 3 lobes that slide in 3 pockets. The geometry and the spacing of these lobes and pockets basically determine the kinematic response that the implant has. It slides forward in flexion and backward in extension, and it matches the natural motion of the spine. With implants with a fixed center of rotation don't translate. And then the unconstrained implants that are mobile and unconstrained tend to translate in the wrong direction. So the advantage of having a stable energetic stability is helpful if you think about the other joints in the spine. The facets and the ligaments are not being loaded because it's not an unconstrained design that might be putting extra load on those other aspects of the spine.
So you're
That's
getting the
the
fluid
beauty.
motion as well as the stability
Right.
without putting pressure on your other areas of the joint.
Right, right. So it basically, we call it energetically stable and self-centering. Many of the other discs, they want to fall, to one side or the other. And, like the natural disc, the Triadyme C from Dymicron basically has a low stiffness and near the center, gets progressively stiffer as it moves away from neutral, and it gives it this quasi elastic, property. So, and you've got, all the degrees of rotation, axial rotation, translation, lateral bending, and flexion extension that the famous White and Punjabi paper talks about that you want to see in terms of the modes of flexibility.
And when you talk about wear, I think the polycrystalline diamond there, you actually have a picture on the website that I think is just amazing, and it talks about the 14 million cycles of these different
Yeah.
materials and shows the size of the breakdown in comparison. Visually, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's remarkable that we can't find a trace there is like micro, more than micro, nanoscale trace, but it can't be determined basically compared to all of the other materials. So we did this at a special lab in Germany that ran the test, and it kind of showed that and confirmed that this biocompatible polycrystalline diamond at that high level 14 million, basically it's going to last beyond the lifetime of any patient. I
40,
kind of joke
40,
that
50 years, right?
it's going to be three lifetimes. Yeah, no, it's going to be 400 years. It's
Wow.
not going to wear out.
And you look at hip or knee, 15 to 25 years. When do you get it? The concern, like, well, if you get it too soon, maybe you have to have it done again. So having a product where once in your lifetime, it's incredible.
Yeah, and it meets the original vision that Dr. Pope had when he started, the company out of the oil drilling company, to say, well, why don't we look at the medical applications for this? We can solve the problem. We want to provide, an orthopedic or basically a med tech implant for those patients to kind of ensure that they have an implant for their lifetime and beyond, if they want to know that after their lifetime.
Take it with them.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's really the differentiator, a key one, besides the other kinematic and motion properties of the product. But it's an issue. Wear debris, we've all heard about in hips, metal and metal, and the big problems that the bigger hip companies had with that. And the FDA, is concerned about it. They had a special panel, meet in 2019. The immunology devices panel met to discuss, the topic of immunological responses to metal-containing products
Yeah.
regulated as medical devices, and the recent post-market issues with some of these products. They're very interested in what we're doing, so it's helpful to us as we're talking to the FDA. They're kind of want us to succeed, because the problem with implants in general is it's wear debris. It's 2 to 10% of the of problems are infection, 10% or maybe fracture failure, or bone fracture is another 5 to 10%. But over half, up to 70%, is because the implant gets loose because of the inflammation from the debris created by wear, and it's called
Osteolysis.
aseptic osteolysis. Yeah, so that's the issue. And so far, all the cervical discs hasn't shown up to be a big issue, but it's still a young field. It's really 15 to 20 years old since the first generation cervical discs were put in. And when you look at some of the seminars and the discussion talking points with the surgeons, it comes up. It says, we don't know. We don't know yet. It's still, the average age of these patients is about 40 to 45 years old. How's it going to look for them, 20 years on, 25, 30 years on? We feel really good that ours is going to be a lifetime,
Well,
implant.
and the wear debris is such a huge challenge, and in terms of polyethylene, the plastic augmentation, from the literature I've read, about 70% of the wear debris comes from those types of materials. So when you look at inflammation and you look at what it does at a cellular level and the complications there, and then the movement of the implant from the osteolysis, I mean, the fact that you're getting rid of that to such a major extent is huge potential to how it's going to benefit patients.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's very exciting that we've got this project, and it's not just a lab bench project. We implanted the first, disc in 2015 at an ambulatory surgery center in Cyprus, Greece. That patient is doing phenomenally well 6 years later, and we've kind of focused in a controlled way because I'm glad that the company has done that. Is You don't want to take something brand new and just throw it out there once you get the first green light to go sell it,
Right.
because you want to take measured steps. You want to crawl, walk, run, and they really focused on Germany and Europe, and they did some studies. They got 4 centers doing a study starting in 2016. Um, the company and many companies in medtech had this problem in Europe in around 2017, 18, when they changed the regulatory rules,
MDR.
um, for notified bodies and MDD to MDR. And so many smaller companies, Dymicron included, was using a smaller notified body, and didn't, that company went out of business. And then there was only about 5 left for everyone to sign on, and it just couldn't happen. So
And the
we took the
notified bodies went down by what, about 40%?
yeah, went from
It's tough.
like, yeah, 50 of them down to about 5 of them initially. I think we're back up to about 20 now. But the company stepped back, and we learned from the first round of experience that we needed actually some changes in the design, just feedback from the surgeons that were using it, primarily in Germany. So we took 2018 and 19 to not only reapply, but changed up and improved the design, came out with a new smaller size, a size 5 millimeter disc, which we didn't have the first launch, some new instruments, and then got the new CE mark for the new design in March of last year, 2020, just as COVID, the pandemic was hitting and kind of shutting down the world. So we were all excited to hit the ground running back to our limited controlled release, but really didn't get started until about fourth quarter of last year. And we're now making great progress and now moving into other key markets in
So
Europe.
what do you see after getting that CE mark, and the upcoming clinical trials, PMA path to the United States? What is sort of the picture moving forward the next 1 to 3 years, would you say?
Yeah, so the top 2 priorities for Dymicron are, one, getting FDA clearance to get to commercialize this product in the US. It's the biggest market in the world, but it is a class 3 device, and it's a full PMA, IDE study. It's an expensive venture, but it's the right thing to do for the ultimate, creating, the ultimate opportunity for this technology to get out in the marketplace. So we are at the point now where we expect to finish our application to the FDA. We've been in quite the back and forth with them on preparing the protocol for that, and we expect our goal is by the end of this year to get the green light and to start our study towards the very end of this year, probably in the fourth quarter of 2021 in the U.S. We've already identified key sites. You know,
Super.
there's a handful of not just a handful now, but really good experienced surgeons and sites in the U.S. that have a lot of experience with all these other discs, and so we know where we want to go. We're looking at doing a 1-level and then followed by a 2-level study because there's quite a few multi-level, 2-level cases. So that's what we'll be doing in 2022 through 2024. We've got to get the 185 or so patients enrolled, and then you have to follow them for 2 years.
Right.
So
Outcomes.
that's just outcomes, and that's what the FDA requires. So the earliest for this product to be commercialized would be 2025 if everything goes perfect. 2026 in the U.S. In the meantime, we're seeing great success with our partners in Europe, in Germany, and now some other key markets that we're just getting started in. Going to follow clinical studies there, and show clinical acceptance, clinical good outcomes, and good market acceptance of the product in these key markets with key opinion leaders. So it's the FDA and it's the success in key select international markets, and then looking at other markets like Australia and places where they do recognize the CE mark with some good clinical outcomes, which are good opportunities for us. So we have
it's
a
exciting, really exciting, what's coming down the road here for the next year or two. Have you guys thought about other product applications as well, or you want to kind of get through this piece first before wading into other areas?
That's a great question, and that comes up a lot because there's clear applications for this technology across the musculoskeletal system.
Yeah.
The total hip just kind of was a pivot point. It was a time that the company decided not to continue to pursue it based on some joint venture activity they had with some bigger orthopedic companies at that time. But think about the applications for ankle, for smaller joints, for elbow, for wrist, for fingers. This non-wear debris complication producing material has great applications. What we're trying to do is avoid the problem that many startups do, which is try and be all things to all people,
Yeah.
and you get defocused and you don't get anything done. You may be making progress on 5 fronts, but you're not really moving the
And you only have
needle.
so much, you only have so much revenue too. So
Well, exactly. It's
only so
limited.
much capital.
So I think at the right time, for us to partner with, that's where a bigger strategic organization that has a total joint division, an extremities division, looks at a Dymicron and looks at the technology, looks at the uniqueness of it and the application of it, and can bring that to bear, which would be a cervical product that they can sell, but then a material and proprietary intellectual property that can be applied for leadership in other areas of musculoskeletal system. I think that's a tremendous opportunity for the investors in Dymicron, which, so far we've taken no outside money. We're very fortunate that
Wow.
all of the investment has been through a close-knit, friends and family network that are sort of tied to the diamond, the man-made diamond industry in Utah. But we are looking for investors, so we are looking for new partners to come in and join us as we continue down this path with the 2 priorities: FDA, PMA, and continued market acceptance outside the U.S.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, so obviously this is extremely exciting in and of itself. At the same time, while we have you here, right? I want to take advantage as much as possible of your experience and your incredible career. So what I'd really like to end with, or as we get near the finish line here, is talk a little bit from a career path standpoint. If you have, maybe some nuggets to share about how you determine And look, I think before we got on here, you and I were sort of talking about how important it is to have a plan for your career, and how you manage that process. So maybe share a little bit about how you made some of the decisions you made in your career progression. And if you have anything, maybe a nugget of wisdom in terms of preparing for interviews, for example, obviously we do a lot of that here. That would be great if you could share those insights with our following.
Absolutely. As I said earlier, I really enjoy mentoring folks that are earlier in their career and providing advice from my own experience. But I did have a plan for my career. I feel very fortunate that I was put in certain places at certain times, and a lot of it is just timing
Yeah.
and where you are at a certain time. And in my 20s, right out of college, I got the opportunity to get into med tech sales for the arthroscopy, business for the leader at the time. But it was a small company. It was Dionix, which is now Smith and Nephew Endoscopy. And because I had a background, growing up outside the US in the UK and had language skills in French and German, one of the leaders of that company said, "Hey, how would you like to help us with our international business?" So,
Wow.
um, and and again, my plan was to dive in, not just sit back and scratch my head and say, "Well, I don't know, I don't know much about that." Um, so because I got that opportunity, and my mentality and my advice to those of you, when you get opportunities, take them.
Yeah.
Uh, I remember the guy who gave me that opportunity. He even said to Ted, "This may be, turn out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread for you in your career, or it may be an absolute disaster, but you're going to learn a lot along the way." And I said,
Either way, you're going to
"Let's
learn
go,
something incredible from it, right?
let's go." So for me, I kind of looked at, I had that great early experience, and when you look at taking responsibility outside the US, it's such a great opportunity for those of you that are listening in, because you learn different cultures, different ways that business is being done,
Yeah.
and you learn how to lead. The true leader, my definition of a true leader, is getting others to follow voluntarily, and that's through trust,
Yeah.
through earning the trust. And I was thrust into that position in my 20s when people looked at me saying, "This isn't a 40 year old international marketing manager. This is a boy doing a man's job." But I learned, if I took care of my clients who were international distributors or country managers, and got their needs met, and worked my tail off, and didn't look sideways, just continued to look down the road. Um, that's what I advise younger folks today: is don't look sideways. Don't think about what you think you should be entitled to after you've been a certain period of time in a certain job. Look to fill your career experience coffer with as much experience as you can. Volunteer, sign up for projects, reach out to other departments. If you're in marketing, spend a lot of time with the engineers. If you're in engineering, spend a lot of time with marketing, or get into the field, understand what goes on in the field, in the sales force. And if you're with a bigger company, sign up for all those great management, opportunities, training to learn about finance and income statements and balance sheets. If you're a non-financial person, it's going to pay off, down the road. And my focus was to learn as much as I could, to add to my experience, with the goal of being well-rounded, to be able to one day be a CEO or a president or general manager, and know that I have the experience, not just in sales, not just in product management, not just in marketing, but understanding medical education, understanding compliance, in terms of legal compliance. It's all changed when the AdvaMed rules came about.
Yes.
I'm one of the older guys that's fortunate to live the pre-AdvaMed life. So many people don't even know what that was, but knowing, having learned the way to do things, you can't cut corners. Shortcuts will get you in the long run, even if you're a smaller company and think you're under the radar.
They'll cost you
So
more in the long run.
my advice is, have a plan, focus on service, serving others. I believe strongly in servant leadership. Um, a big believer in the principles of Stephen Covey Sr., the 7 habits that he teaches his son, the speed of trust, of engendering that in your actions every day.
Yeah.
Live your life with purpose, but also balance. Don't come to the end of your career and find out that your kids don't know you. You've gone through a couple marriages because you were so career focused. You didn't sharpen your own personal saw and keep life perspective and have a purpose. And that's what if that helps somebody, I hope it does.
What great wisdom. I think that's fantastic. I mean, we have to remember what your why is, right?
Right.
And a big part of your why from a career standpoint, if you have a family, ought to be that you're supporting that family, right? And so not having a career at the detriment of that. But you said so many things that are so smart. And I always say our goal every single day here is to bring value, bring others value. And if you put your career, if you have an idea and a plan for what you want to do, take the opportunities, right? You grab them, you go after it. You're going to make mistakes, but if you're focused on other people bringing value, you'll get all the rewards that you want. And most importantly, learn as much as you can, because then that allows you to bring more value to more people.
Yeah, and be kind. Be nice to people. It comes back in spades. Reach out if someone's having a hard time. You just don't know on a given day when you run into somebody and they're grumpy or upset, that what they've gone through.
Right.
They may have just had their best friend, pass away, and they're
Especially
just,
in these strange times, right? It's been a
oh
very
yeah, you just
challenging.
don't know. So kindness goes a long way, and just volunteering, your services, I mean, what you're doing here, Darwin, is putting this out, for the world to benefit from, your contacts with others. And I was really glad to be able to meet you recently at a
Yeah.
MedTech conference, and be able to continue to work together. But be kind, and life's too short. Enjoy it. Have
Yes.
a positive attitude. If you take everything too seriously, it's just really,
Yep.
just
Well,
just
that's you. You're
have a good sense of humor.
you're describing, and I talk about this regularly, but you're describing, from my perspective, the difference between a proactive approach to life and a reactive one, right?
Right.
We want to base our life based on principles, and we plan out based on those principles, and then execute on it, right? Not
Right.
having a bad day just because it's raining or somebody wasn't nice. You determine what that is based on your principles. And one of the things that you just said previously, and I say this all the time, every time we interact, we either gain credibility or we lose credibility, right?
Right.
And if you're focused on bringing people value and you're genuine and you're nice, then you're going to bring, more than likely, you're going to bring people value, right? And it's going to be a win-win
Yeah.
all the way around. So,
Yeah. Sincerity and humility. I mean, in interview tips, I just tell people, be yourself.
yeah,
Don't try and practice up so much, because I interview a lot of people. I practice interview with people, and I can spot the professional interviews a mile off. and I
yeah,
and I've been well trained to ask key questions, kind of stumble. I've got some great zingers that people stops people in their tracks. It's like, well, that wasn't in the manual. How do I answer that one? But just be yourself, and don't overstate things. Never, never, do that. But just keep it simple, keep it direct. Listen. The skills for interviewing, not just for interviewing, but for managing, do much more listening than you do talking.
listen to
I know.
understand, not to
Correct.
respond.
Right. So
Well,
I haven't done a lot of that on this webinar, but
well, that's good, because you're on here so that we can learn from you and know what's going on at Dymicron. So
yeah, yeah,
I'm so grateful I got the opportunity to spend time with you, meet you at LSI. Great conference, and even getting to share with people the perspective of the big company versus a small company. They all serve a great purpose. At the same time, the innovation and the excitement of those companies that are doing the cutting edge work, it's pretty exciting. So I'm
yeah.
super grateful for you coming on and sharing your knowledge, your experience, and the innovation that's happening at Dymicron. And I wish you the greatest success And hopefully we can get you to come on again another year or so here to update us as this your success continues forward, the company as well as your own.
I'd love that. Thank you, Darwin, for the opportunity, and thanks for the time to be able to share my experience and what we're doing at Dymicron. It's an exciting project.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ted. Have a great evening, and look forward to following your success and the company's
All right.
success.
Hear me, won't you speak to me when I open up? And I forward my thoughts to you, but sometimes I say you're thinking too much, and I don't wanna hide.